ever do, even more than raising amazing human kids, is the work of self-mastery, healing yourself, because that's the pebble that has the biggest ripple effects. You want your kids to be amazing humans, like better humans than you, heal yourself so that they're a reflection of you. You want a business that's big and philanthropical, that donates a lot, right? Heal yourself, master yourself, so that you could build a business that serves and lasts, builds legacies when you're long gone. We spend too much time doing the outside stuff. I'm going to build a skyscraper, and I'm going to build this monument. I'm going to do all great, but the greatest work you can do is the work of self-mastery.
Welcome my guest, Bedros Keuilian. Bedros is a serial entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, one of the nation's fastest growing franchises, and author of the book, Man Up, How to Cut the Bullshit and Kick Ass in Business and in Life. Bedros' journey has been a true rags to riches story of a self-made entrepreneur who escaped communism, came to the United States, ate out of dumpsters, and built several multi-million-dollar generating global brands and businesses. He's known as the hidden genius that entrepreneurs turn to, create high-level mastermind and coaching programs, quickly scale their businesses, and solve the most pressing bottlenecks so that they can start making the quantum leap to massive success. Bedros has been featured and quoted in publications such as Forbes, Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur magazine, and so many more publications worldwide. He has created impactful programs for men such as The Project and the Squire Program. He is what a leader truly represents and embodies. Pursued podcast. This episode, let me just tell you, is beyond special. First of all, I'm in the studio of Bedros Keuilian, the CEO and founder of Fit Body Bootcamp, among so many other things. But this is such a privilege because not only are you such a remarkable human, your story, your resilience, your resolve is by far the most beautiful story I've heard, and you are so vulnerable in sharing it all. So this is such a privilege. So welcome, Bedros.
Well, thank you. And the older I get, Erica, the more vulnerable I become. So at 47, I just kind of put it all out there now.
It's so beautiful, and I really want to recognize that.
Thank
and
you.
I know we're going to go really deep into that today because
Thank
I
you.
really I want men to learn from you of your struggles, your adversity, and how you've become this very successful entrepreneur by opening up, by being vulnerable, being a leader, and in so many ways. So thank you. The honor
Appreciate
to
it.
just be here in the same space as you. So let's begin.
Yes.
So your story, most importantly, you came from a communist family and you moved to America. I know, most importantly, legally. And I know your father likes to emphasize that.
Thank you for that. Thank you
Well,
for that.
I think it's a great thing to mention because I know, learning so much about you recently, what I love that you share is that you appreciate being an American.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people today that are American, and I can speak for myself, we don't recognize all the gifts that we are given in this somewhat free country right now.
Yeah. Somewhat free country right now, well said.
But let's talk about your story. So what was it like, since I know you moved here quite young to America, but let's talk about your story of the process to get you here.
Yeah, so my dad was a member of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union had occupied Armenia, which is where we're from. And while it's a great honor, quote unquote, to be a member of the party, if you choose not to be, because they do give you a choice, and if you choose not to be, you get shipped off to Siberia. And so he reluctantly accepted being a Communist Party member in 1975, the year after I was born. And that gave him a lot of privileges, a lot of access. And so in a country that was starving, there was lots of poverty, yet a very prideful, part of a very prideful Soviet Union, very prideful nation, we didn't have much. But as a party member, as a Communist Party member, he could go into a grocery store and get bread for us. It might be stale bread, but it's bread that maybe your family would not have, that ours could get because he's a party member. And so we lived the best that one could live in Armenia. But my dad, I believe, like he was just born in the wrong country. He rocked Ray-Ban sunglasses and Jordache jeans. You remember Jordache jeans?
Yes,
right?
of course.
He listened to the Beach Boys and Elvis. And so he was an American through and through. And he loved the American way. And all that stuff he got, on the black market, right? And so when 1980 came around, in 81, my brother's 14 years older than me. And if anyone studies their history, they know that the Soviet Union had occupied Afghanistan because trying to prop up a communist government there in Afghanistan. And so in 1981, while the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan, my brother was about to go into the Soviet army. And my dad's like, the hell if my older son is going to go and fight the Soviet war when we don't even want to be occupied by the Soviet Union, because he had some pull and he made some money under the table in a very clever fashion. He was a tailor and he had figured out how to get enough material together where for every 5 or 6 suits that they would make, he'd had enough material left over that he could make one suit on the black market and sell it. And all that money he accumulated, and he bribed the right officials to allow us to escape into Italy. When we got into Italy, I was 6 years old at this point. We got into Italy. I had my first banana, which was spectacular. Hadn't eaten.
That's so funny you remember that.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
I remember my first banana, peanut butter, changed my life. Oh my gosh. But we went to the American consul, and my dad said, "Hey, look, I'm a communist. I denounce communism. You guys can pump me for any information you want. We want to go to the United States." And so within 10 days, all the right paperwork was done, and we legally entered the United States. And my dad just was like, put me in any state you want that's hot. And so California, because it was very cold in Armenia, you get like 3 months of like warmth, and then the rest of it is winter. So that's, we had a tough upbringing. We were poor and we were broke here. Thank God there was Section 8 housing, government-assisted housing, and so we lived in kind of the gang-infested parts of Santa Ana, California, not too far from here. But my dad, again, forward thinker, he's like, we're not going to live in Glendale, California. And being from Southern California, Glendale, North Hollywood, lots of Armenians. So you're not going to be able to assimilate and become American. So we're going to live in Santa Ana in the Anaheim area where there's 0 Armenians, and you're going to become Americanized. So as I lost my accent, understood the English language and all that, we moved around a lot and went to 3 different elementary schools, 2 different junior highs, 2 different high schools. But the good news is that we just constantly stayed positive. If we had to dumpster dive for food, we did. My mom and dad worked multiple jobs. My older brother and sister had multiple jobs. And my job was to exploit this amazing country called the United States, so long as I also served the people in it. That was my dad's rule. Like, just take advantage of the freedoms and opportunities, but also remember to serve. Show up as a servant leader. When you're a little dude, you're very impressionable and you look up to your dad. And my dad was like larger than life with like big sideburns and a trench coat. And so I was like, yes, sir. And sometimes ignorance is bliss. And I didn't know that I couldn't do all those things, he said, and therefore I knew I could. And so I did. And so while I didn't do well in college, dropped out of college in 32 days, had ADD and OCD. The Marine Corps didn't want me because I had flat feet. Oh, I still have flat feet. Turns out entrepreneurship was my path, and I kind of call myself the Cinderella man. Like, the odds were so stacked against me.
Oh my gosh.
But my dad was like, brought you here for a purpose, and today my sister works for me, which is great. I remember telling her she had this job at a pizzeria 2 years, so in 1982, she had this job at a pizzeria. The guy that owned the pizzeria was such a jerk to her. He would drink out of her cup that was sitting back there in the kitchen to make sure that clear liquid was not Sprite or 7-Up, that it was water. And she would come home crying, telling my dad, and at the time she was like 19 years old, telling my dad, like, this guy's drinking out of my cup, and then I'm expected to drink out of it afterwards. And I remember telling her, like, hey sis, one day I'm gonna be rich and wealthy, and I'm gonna take care of you. And today she works for me from her home, and I just love that. The American dream is alive and well, and I think more people ought to embrace it instead of trying to destroy it.
Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing all that. Well, so let's talk about a bit of your adversity that you went through. First of all, I think it's amazing that your father taught you great values. That obviously has been instilled in you, and it sounds like your childhood actually prepared you for the man you are today, which you learned obviously mostly, it sounds like, from your father.
Yeah.
So if we could talk about some of your adversities that you went through.
Yeah. Well, so if this interview was done maybe 7 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about the thing I'm about to bring up, but thank goodness for therapy. After 16 months of talk therapy with an amazing therapist out here in Brea, Dr. Kevin Downing, I'm able to say that between the ages of 4 and 6, while in Armenia, I was molested by 2 older boys over and over again. And as it turns out, that when something traumatic like that happens to anyone, male or female, it doesn't matter if it's molest, rape, physical abuse, emotional abuse, the fight or flight mechanism of your brain just lights up like a Christmas tree when they do a MRI or a CAT scan of your brain. And so I always lived my life as a young man in a state of anxiety, in a state of panic, like almost like the shoe's about to fall off, like the next shoe's about to fall off. I couldn't even tell you why. Everything would be great, but something's about to happen. And so growing up, I would get into a lot of trouble because of that. I've been involved in, it's embarrassing to say, but carjackings. I've done home invasion robberies just because I wanted to feel like a tough guy. Been in police helicopter chases. What my dad doesn't realize is him escaping and us escaping the Soviet Union didn't just bring us the freedom and opportunity. He literally saved me from what was daily molestation. I find myself closing my eyes when I say that because I still don't want to picture it. So I still have more work to do there, don't I? And so the adversities that we dealt with here were nothing compared to what I had to deal with there. And, being bullied and having gang members steal your bike and beat you up, telling you you're a effing foreigner, get out of this country, it's people like your parents are taking all of our good jobs. And I'm just like, so I just wanted to play ball with you,
Wow.
So that was the level of adversity, but I'll take that level of adversity and living in Section 8 housing with like one time the housing that we lived in, the apartment complex, we lived in Shade Tree Apartments.
You have a good memory, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. On Ball and Gilbert. How about that? I remember the cross streets. Anyways, Shade Tree Apartments on Ball and Gilbert in Anaheim. It was so filthy that I got lice. Within a week of living there, I got lice. And, we were broke. We couldn't afford lice treatment. And so my mom had my dad siphon out gasoline from a parked car. And then, like every apartment complex has that grassy area where people play or whatever. She brought me out to the grassy area. This is what a communist mom does, right? She loves you and she's going to take care of you, but to everyone watching, they probably thought she was going to light me on fire.
Seriously.
So my dad has a cup of or jar of gasoline that he siphoned out of a parked car, and my mom has me double over and in Armenian tells me, close your eyes and don't stand back up. She's washing my hair with gasoline. And I remember kind of cracking my eyes open. I could see all these feet around me. Obviously, all the neighborhood kids are watching, like, what is this foreigner lady doing to this kid? And of course, she had water and she would rinse my head, but it worked as lice treatment. But that's the adversity that we faced. My dad, one of those jobs he was pumping gas at a gas station. And next to it was an Alpha Beta grocery store. And he discovered that Alpha Beta had this giant dumpster, like all grocery stores do, in the back, where they throw away old food or expired food that they can't sell. And he's like, well, those eggs are expired, but they're not necessarily bad. That bread has mold, but the wife can pick off the mold and fry the bread up and we could eat it. And so being the smallest, physically the smallest one in the family, he would boost me up. Once it was nightfall, he would boost me up into the dumpster and I'd pull out a head of lettuce that had all these brown leaves and he'd peel it off until there was a tiny little green head of lettuce under there, and eggs and milk, and we'd smell the milk. If it's not sour but it's expired, cool, we'll drink it. And so jokingly, I always say I was kind of the breadwinner too. you know. But that adversity also gave me this advantage of being resourceful and being relentless in your pursuit of getting what you want. Like, we were hungry, you gotta eat, right? The money that they were making had to go towards the rent, and he was saving up to open up a little tailor shop. That's all he knew. So the money couldn't go towards food, couldn't go towards clothing. So clothing was found in dumpsters. When people would move out of apartments, they'd throw stuff away. Our mattress was stained. 5 of us were sleeping on one mattress. But we found it in when someone moved out, they threw away a mattress. Our TV was this old TV that had a giant black spot on the screen, but it worked. And clothes, Herman Munster. I had a Herman Munster shirt, and so at Salk School, the second elementary school I went to, all the kids called me Herman instead of Bedros, and I just decided I'm gonna answer to Herman. And so all of that creates all these emotional scars on you, right? But the weird thing is, you grow up and you have a chip on your shoulder, and you realize that now I'm gonna get big and strong, and I'm gonna be the source of adversity for others, which is not the best way to handle things. And I think as men, we kind of resort to anger and brutality. You hear about domestic violence, like, wow, that guy's an accountant and everything was fine. He's just so passive and nice, and all of a sudden he like lost his shit and
like something triggered him.
Right. And as it turns out, we all, like 1 out of every 3 people, experience some kind of physical or mental abuse. 1 out of every 4 people experience sexual abuse. So we're walking around scarred, wearing masks, trying to protect and soothe ourselves, and create this false identity of like, I'm a tough guy, when I was really just this hurt boy that was afraid, and the alarm bells were constantly going off. But it wasn't until my late 30s that I decided to start healing. And that was a byproduct of a massive panic attack that I had, which I had never had a panic attack. So I thought, like, holy shit, I'm 38 years old and I'm having a heart attack. And all I could remember was, who's gonna take care of Diana, my wife? I made a promise to her, and how do I fulfill that if I'm dead? Who's walking Chloe down the aisle? And who's gonna teach Andrew to be a modern day knight? And thankfully, it wasn't a heart attack. All the symptoms went away, the racing heart, the sweatiness, the thug lug that I would hear in my head, the tunnel vision. It was just horrible. If anyone's ever had a panic attack, they know what it feels like. Went to the doctor the next day, and he's like, dude, your heart's fine, but I think you're stressed. Yeah. And my wife's like, let me tell you something. He takes Vicodin and NyQuil to fall asleep every night. And he is hopped up on Adderall the first thing in the morning and caffeine, just so he can kind of jumpstart his body. And he deals with a lot of stress, and he and his business partner don't get along. Like, she just vomited all this information to the doctor, and he's like, dude, we're gonna put you on Xanax. So they put me on Xanax. 2 weeks in on Xanax, I feel great. But I have no creativity, no desire to work, and I just feel like I would probably drool out the side of my mouth. And I'm like, hey doc, this isn't gonna work. Like, I've got this franchise I gotta build. I just started Fit Body Bootcamp a few years earlier. I wanted to be this international fitness franchise. I had this vision in my head. And I'm like, all I wanna do is sit around. He goes, well, we can get you off Xanax, but then you gotta go through talk therapy. Like, you have to do some kind of work to deal with your stresses, anxieties, and things that are triggering you. And that's when I went and started working with Kevin Downing once a week for 16 months.
And you still go?
I only see him for little tune-ups here and there. Like, now I know, he's taught me a little rule. When you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, you start getting triggered. Halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And so when I was hungry, lonely, I can take care of. When I start feeling tired and fatigued, and I just don't want to be here anymore, instead of isolating, most men want to isolate. We just want to ignore and avoid.
Absolutely.
And then we lean into vices. One great way to ignore and avoid is, let me play a whole bunch of video games. Let me drink heavily. Let me gamble, pornography, infidelity, you name it. It's a built-in mechanism, I get it. That's probably how the caveman had to, you just saw your fellow cave guy dude get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, and you still have to hunt and then provide food, so you have to compartmentalize. But today, that's not as useful and functional in life. And so that which we compartmentalized, we now have to bring out and process and cope with. And unprocessed trauma is the trigger of addictions. And so I had my series of addictions. Food was a really big one. And so, yeah, these days I work with Kevin. Whenever I need him, I just literally reach out like, hey, can I come on a Monday? Yeah, sure, come next Monday. And he'll always take me as his last patient because we have a bit of a history together now. And so I'll hang out.
And you name drop him a lot, which is so great.
27 people have gone to him since.
I'm sure. Yeah. I think it's wonderful that you share his name, and I'm sure he's thankful, because sometimes people don't like to reveal this. And actually, that's what I want to, first of all, acknowledge everything you just shared right now, vulnerably and openly, because I think men and women listening need that permission that it doesn't make you less than to go to a therapist or seek support, because I think so many people feel that's weak or that they are broken, something's wrong with them. And I think you, being a very strong man yourself, the fact that you're open and sharing that you were realizing something was, your body was trying to tell you something wasn't going right.
You know, it's funny you say your body. There's a great book out there. I'm sure you've probably read it or heard of it. The Body Keeps the Score. Great book. And literally, as Kevin recommended that to me, and I'm reading it, he talks about how boys that have been molested or raped usually end up growing up and, you know, getting really big and muscular, using steroids, getting tattoos, and I'm like, oh geez. I would
You're like, I'm a poster child.
Yeah, right? And the whole idea there was that I'm gonna get big and strong and no one's ever gonna molest me again. Well, yeah, you're a grown-ass man, no one's gonna molest you. But it goes to show you how unhealed we are, that even as a 20-something, 30-something-year-old man, I'm still going into Mexico buying steroids and injecting myself, and you justify it with, but I'm into powerlifting. I love this. You know, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I do this. But really, I was trying to protect that little boy within me because I hadn't taken the time to heal and process through the shame, rage, and confusion that comes with being sexually abused. Shame. I can't believe this happened to me. Erica can't find out. Ed can't find out. No one can find out. It's embarrassing. Rage, like, how did this happen to me? Why didn't anyone protect me? Like in Armenia, we call them babushkas, the grandmas. It's a Russian word, but we adopted a lot of Russian words. And there's all these babushkas would take care of us. You know, hey, wash your hands, come in and eat. Even if they weren't your grandma, they would just take care of the community kids. Yet no one saw me, or if they did, they didn't help me, right? When I was getting molested. And so I had all this rage. And then the confusion, like, did I do something to invite those two older boys to, like, am I gay? Am I secretly gay?
Wow.
Right? And so you could imagine the things I did in my life to prove to myself, my subconscious, that I wasn't gay. Like, how stupid.
Yeah, but like you said, I think a lot of men or women that have experienced some form of this go through those stages. And so what could you say for men or women listening right now to give them permission to seek out help or how could they become more aware that something like, let's say, a certain addiction they're having, or their anger, or certain things that are triggering them, to get to the root cause of why is that happening, you know? Patterns,
especially destructive patterns, whether it's self-destructive or friendship destructive. So you and I are friends, we go out for lunch, you say something, it triggers me, I'm like, not gonna talk to you again, Erica. Can't believe you said that, da-da-da-da-da. 2 weeks later, I'm hanging out with Ed, we're having a good time. All of a sudden, he says something that triggers me. Now, did Ed and Erica and Julian and Bob collude? Or do I have unprocessed trauma? And so as soon as someone tries to, maybe it's a triggering event or topic, or maybe you try to get too close to me and I can love you, but only from here. You can't come here because that can't happen if you're not healed. And so I have to push you back, and then you take it as a rejection, and therefore, you know, and so I had these patterns of like constantly rejecting people out of my life. And so look for the patterns that are destroying relationships, destroying your business, self-destructive to your health and sanity, and then go, okay, unless all these people, random people, are colluding, there's probably something wrong with me. Like the one thing there's common, it's here. And I'd love for people to realize they're not broken. One thing I share at the project, this men's personal development program I run, is you're not broken, so you don't need to be fixed. Are we allowed to cuss on your podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. A fucked up person did a fucked up thing to you. Now we just need to unfuck you. That's it.
True.
A fucked up person who was probably fucked up by someone else and by someone else, right?
True.
did a fucked up thing, a very bad thing that they probably regret. Like, they know that was bad. Those boys knew that was bad. I wouldn't be surprised if, if whether they're dead from alcohol abuse, drug abuse, like, you can't, how do you cope with that, right? Doing that to a young boy who's looking for like this, looking to older boys as a rite of passage into manhood, and that they take advantage of something so sacred.
Yeah.
But you're not broken, you don't need fixing. Somebody fucked up, did a fucked up thing, and we just need to unfuck you by literally processing through that. And the three things, I wish I was smart enough to say that I figured out the shame, rage, confusion. After about 2 months of working with Kevin, he's like, hey, you have shame, huh? I'm like, that's it. And he's like, this is why. He's like, and you have all this rage, you have this rage in your eyes. I'm like, well, fuck yeah, Kevin, like, no one took care of me. Like, who's gonna protect me? These babushkas would pull me by my ear, like practically tear my fucking ear off, yet they weren't there protecting me when I'm getting molested in the carport. He goes, do you think they saw? He goes, because I can't imagine that, they're pulling you by your ear when you come into their house with shoes on. Would they have done that to those boys? I'm like, yeah. Don't you think that they would have then, that's a much worse crime that they were doing, that if they saw, I'm like, oh, you're right.
Yeah.
But I never processed through the idea that, so I just felt like they abandoned me, that I have all this shame and no one could find out, because apparently I thought I was the only person that this has ever happened to. And then when he starts sharing the stats with me, I'm like, well, shoot, Kevin, your partner's in the other room with another client. So that's 4 of us right there. So one out of 4, I'm like, oh shit, that's me, I'm the one. And if there's 8 of us, there's 2 of us. And you do the math, like, he's like, can I tell you how many men, how many women have sat on that couch and have walked in your shoes? I'm like, really? He goes, you can heal? I'm like, I can? Like, it was like this surprise.
Wow.
Because I told him, there's this monster in me, and Kevin, this monster can't come out because I am physically there, but I mentally go away and I will destroy everything. He goes, it's called disassociation. I'm like, oh my God, there's a word for it. And he goes, yes. I go, so there's hope? He goes, yes. Like, I thought I carried this monster with me that could just, you're dead to me immediately, and I could just go away, because I had to disassociate. When you're being molested, you have to mentally go elsewhere, even though your body's there. And I looked at that as almost a superpower in business, because something could be going wrong. It doesn't matter. I can compartmentalize, go away, and still focus on the thing that needs to be focused on, or business partner or some kind of vendor wasn't doing things the way I wanted. You're dead to me. I'm on to the next one. I didn't want to work through a conversation. We're not doing that, which is so stupid, because all of humanity is communication and problem solving. Yet I didn't want to problem solve and communicate. Everybody was just dead to me, and I was rejecting the world. Healing is the greatest gift you can give yourself.
Absolutely. Well, let me just ask you, did you know that that was what was causing your rage and anger, or you suppressed it for so long that it was almost like it was hidden, like it was a shadow, as they would say, shadow work.
It was shadow work. I like that.
Yeah, that we put on all these masks to kind of suppress and suppress and suppress.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you didn't recognize that that was what was causing all this.
No, in fact, when, I don't even know what things, when that memory would come up, it would be like a little mental snapshot of, I would see it happening as I was standing somewhere else watching those 2 older boys doing that to that young boy. I would immediately find a way to distract myself and bury it deeper. In fact, and by the way, I went to Kevin to work through my anxiety and my panic attacks.
Yeah.
Within 4 sessions, he's like, I think there's something deeper here, right? And which was actually going to be my last session, because he had given me the tools to work through my anxiety. And but in 4 sessions, I built such trust with him, or he built such trust with me, I should say, that he goes, can I ask some questions? And he did. And before you know it, I'm like bawling and crying, and I'm sharing with him something I'd never shared with anyone.
Wow.
Right? And I remember sobbingly telling him, he's like, so you're molested by 2 older boys. I'm so sorry to hear that. And now I'm crying even more. And I'm on the 2nd floor of his office, looking at my car, thinking, all I have to do is fling my body through the glass.
Escape.
And escape. Like, I'm willing to do that right now. That's how painful this conversation is with this other guy, right? And, but I also knew, like, he's good for me. Like, I'm fighting this, like, dilemma in my head. Run out the door, fling your body through the glass. It's just one story. You'll live, you'll be fine. Get in your car, drive to the hospital, get bandaged up. Like, I remember literally processing that. Wow. And then like, no, Kevin's good for you. Kevin's good for you. Just stay here. And so he said, would you want to maybe come one more session and talk about that? I'm like, sobbingly, I go, Kevin, everything's fine. everything's fine with that little boy. I've dealt with the issues with that little boy. He goes, can you say, I've dealt it with the issues that happened to me? I start sobbing again. He goes, Bedros, that's called disassociation. Like, you've separated the little boy, like, from, that's you. So ultimately, months later, I don't know, probably 12, 13 months in, he had me write a letter to that little boy, and he gave me the first sentence, and the first sentence was, between the ages, dear Bedros, between the ages of 4 and 6, you were molested by 2 older boys, but now you are ... And it took me months to write that letter to myself. I tried writing on paper with pen, using a pencil. I tried typing it on my iPhone. Let me do it on my MacBook on a Word doc. I didn't want to write the words and the things that happen. Finally, a few months later, it all came out in 11 pages of like a letter to this little boy and saying, but today, you know, you're in the process of healing and you've done so much and you served so much. And I had never even taken the time to pat myself on the back for all the good I've done. Instead, I just put this mask on like I'm healed, I'm fine, I'm a tough guy. And ironically, people today, like I've softened up more and people like, man, when you walk into a room, you have this presence, like you have this thing about you. I'm like, huh. And I don't like when people are like, well, boy, that's alpha. And I realize, well, maybe it is. Maybe it's just I like love people. I'm a lover of humanity. I want to serve people and I want to protect people. Yeah, that's alpha, because what I was trying to be, this like bully, that's not alpha. You're a hurt boy with a mask on.
You know, you are so human. I mean, like when you talk about everything, what I think people obviously are drawn to you is you're so human and you're so authentic and you're humble. That's one thing I know hearing you speak so much is you're so humble for everything you've created in your life. And I want men and again, women listening to you speak is that you are so vulnerable and open about this because you're trying to help others become leaders in their life and business and how they could grow. And as you said, healing is one of the most important and essential. It's not just like, oh, maybe it's something you could do, but it's essential. To life and business. So I love that you share everything. And what would you say to give people the permission to do the work to heal? Like, what would you suggest somebody should do to begin the process if, let's say, they're not ready to go to a therapist, but what would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because today there's so many great tools that you can use. We could start off with books, right? The Body Keeps the Score. Do the Work. I forget the author's name. Her IG handle is the Holistic Psychologist.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
You got it.
I forget her name, but anyway, there's that. There's the Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Yes.
Yeah, there's so many great books out there that will tell you what, like the feelings that you have and what they mean, and then you have to do the work, right? And then you can literally go and read about bilateral stimulation, EMDR, and go, all right, I'm gonna start running. Because it turns out your left side and your right side of the brain actually want to work together. I'm sure you know this, to solve problems. How often has it happened where you're, I got this conundrum I got to work through, and then you go have a good workout. Maybe you're swimming, you're running, you're biking, you're doing anything that's repetitive, tick, 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 tick. And as it turns out, anything that has bilateral stimulation, stimulates both sides of the brain, bilateral, you recruit your left and right side of the brain to process through a problem. And bilateral stimulation, EMDR, is a great form of therapy that's not necessarily talk therapy. You sit with the therapist, and they just start either tapping on your knee, or they give you these little things to hold, and it goes tick, 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 and they just kind of lead the conversation along. And then you just start, your brain knows how to heal. You have to get it into the state to heal. So we can start with books, and then we can start doing like self-bilateral stimulation, EMDR, by doing things that are repetitive and healing. But at some point, you do need to talk about it, process through it, because the moment the words come out of your mouth, when these traumatic events live in the shadows, they set these limiting beliefs. There are these toxic cognitions. They are the glass ceiling on love, on relationships, on the depth of your relationships, on success in business. And so you press against the glass ceiling, upper limit, and then come back down. The moment you could process through these things, take them out of the shadows, bring them into light by talking about it, saying, hey, Erica, listen, I got to tell you something. We're friends. As a kid, I was molested by 2 older boys. And then look at you and you're like, oh man, I'm so sorry that happened. Hey, B, you want to order another margarita? I'm like, sure. Yeah. That mountain in my life that was so scary that no one can hear about becomes this little speed bump. I'm like, wait, my friend Erica doesn't give 2 shits. Like, so you still like me? We're still friends? Like, yeah. I'm sorry that happened, but you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Great. That's what happens when you go through talk therapy, and like you have someone go, hey, hundreds of people have sat on that couch, cops to firefighters to Navy SEALs, other entrepreneurs just like you, and so you are no different.
Yeah.
Tough guy dudes can heal. I'm like, I can? Because I thought the monster has to live with me until I die.
Wow. And actually talking about that, so your book, Man Up, I've read it. It's not only for men, it's for women too. It's for any human. Yeah. There's so many tangible tools in there that you leave, and like you share your story, and of course you share even exercises, and a lot you talk about is leadership, which that in particular, being the successful entrepreneur you are, you talk a lot about leadership. But I want to kind of move out of, thank you for sharing your healing journey, because I think that's number one, like you said, and I love how you talk about that it's a glass ceiling on every area of your life.
Yeah.
So moving from that to, I know you talk a lot about confidence, because I think you're asked that question, like, how do you become so confident being where you came from and moving into a successful entrepreneur? How did you get that confidence? I think you talk about, it's called the 3 C's.
Yeah, confidence, credibility, and competence. And so when you're competent, it's like when you say that I'm going to go work out, and you work out consistently enough where you get good at it, you develop a competency, you develop this credibility with yourself. Like your reputation with yourself is like, hey man, I trust you, you're good. You said you're going to work out for 60 days straight without taking a break. I'll give you a great example. I do these goofy 6-week challenges. I don't know why I do them.
Yes, talk about this. I love this.
It's the first one was in 2010. I joked, my wife, when I met her, she was a marathon runner. She still runs a lot, but she would run 3 marathons a year. I, of course, would inject myself with steroids and lift heavy weights and whatever. And the joke was, why do I need to run? I don't need to run. I just need to lift weights. Like God's designed me to lift weights. And so we do put ourselves in these boxes where, oh, I don't remember names. Well, keep saying that. You're not going to remember names, right? And so I'd put myself in this box of I don't run. And so, we were dating. She goes, hey, would you go on a run with me? I was like, tell you what, if you will marry me one day, I will go on a run, right? And that was my way of kind of testing the waters. And she goes, yeah, okay, fine, right? So she was just playing with me, but months later I proposed, and a couple of years later we get married. So I did commit to her that one day I would run a marathon. Well, 9 years in, I had yet to run a marathon with her. And I hadn't kept my word. And so one day my business partner in one of my companies, Craig Ballantyne, is literally going off at a client, telling this client, like, you got to cut your deadlines in half and then cut them in half again and then just attack them with like singularity of focus. I'm like, yeah. He had me all gassed up, so I start texting my wife. I'm like, hey, when's your next marathon? She goes, San Diego Marathon, 6 weeks from now. I'm like, sign me up. She goes, they have a half marathon. I'm like, that's for losers. Sign me up for the full one, right?
Of course, go big.
Yeah. Having never run before.
Oh my goodness.
In that same room, this is funny, when you speak it into the universe to people, in that same room, while we're doing a mastermind, there's Jill Brewer, runwithjill.com. And during our lunch break, I'm like, hey, Jill, I know you're paying me because we're coaching you, but I just signed up for a marathon, and I need you to coach me. Like, what do I do? So she wrote out a program for me, and in a very painful fashion, I finished this marathon. Since then, I've done all these 6-week challenges. If it scares me and it's out of my comfort zone, I'll take it. If it's guitar lessons, salsa dancing, jiu-jitsu, MMA fighting, rock climbing because I was afraid of heights, surfing because I didn't want to drown, I do it. Some things I hate and I'll never do again. Other things I'm like, oh my God, I love surfing. Oh my God, I love jiu-jitsu. It's like a human chess game. And so, but I'll use jiu-jitsu as an example because going back to confidence, how do you build confidence? Well, it's simple. You first make a commitment to doing something. In my case, I'm going to work with a jiu-jitsu coach 3 times a week for 6 weeks, 2 hours at a time. Like, that is drinking out of a fire hose. Like, my body was hurting every single day. But even when I wanted to have that internal dialogue, hey, don't show up, you're hurting, just have an excuse, he's gonna make you tap out, your joints are gonna hurt, I would just show up anyway. So I developed this competency in jiu-jitsu. Towards the end of the 6-week challenge, when he brought a guy my size, who was a brown belt, to roll with, we had like a three round match. I had some level of competency there where while the guy schooled me, I was like, hey, I think I can take this guy on, right? So competency led to this sense of confidence or credibility. I like had this credibility, like, hey man, I'm proud of myself for doing this for 6 weeks. And while the guy made me tap out all 3 matches, that gave me some confidence that a brown belt, 230-pound brown belt, can take on a white belt at 230 pounds. But the average person on the street, I can probably have my way with them. And that gave me a sense of confidence. So competency leads to credibility, leads to confidence. We don't do things consistently enough, so let's make it 4 C's. Be consistent at the competency you're trying to build, to establish credibility with yourself, to have confidence in that one area. And I say that because we see people who are great at making money, but they have no confidence with talking to women. And like, I'm single, I'm gonna be single the rest of my life. Or they're great at building muscle, and you're like, man, you look at you, you're like a Greek god. It's like, but they see a pretty girl and they just like look over your shoulders, at your feet, they can't make eye contact, right? And so like you can't, so it turns out you can actually develop that competency and build credibility and have confidence in every area, but it takes repetitions to do it, and that's what most people lack.
And I think it's really important that you mention is the keeping the word to yourself.
Yeah.
I think most important.
Yeah.
I remember when I started this podcast, I'm like, if I just get to 100 episodes, I'll be happy because that means I kept with it.
Yeah.
And I always tell other people, like, I'm so proud of myself for being consistent because I'm keeping my word to stay consistent with this podcast. So if I miss something, that's on me. So I think that completely builds your confidence when you keep your word.
Absolutely.
And you say there's W and L's, so the wins and losses, which is important to kind of keep score of, right?
Mm-hmm. It is. And, do you wake up to an alarm? I know I do.
I do. And you talk about this, and let me just tell you, I snooze, and it's literally, when you talk about this, I cringe because I'm like, I have a problem right now. So I literally have a problem with snoozing because I feel, honestly, I think it's because I'm not getting good quality sleep.
Gotcha.
But I try to wake up at 5:20 every day. That's when my alarm clock goes on. And I've been hitting the snooze. And so I have completely those L's to start off my day. And when I hear you talk about this, I'm like,
so here's my theory.
Problems right now.
But listen, and I'm not going to bash you. God knows I was the king of the snooze button, right? But here's my theory on that, and I believe this to be true. There's something about momentum, something to be said about momentum. We know that in sales, like if you make a sale, you're going to make the next. You're like 3 times more likely to make the next sale. There's something about inertia. Like if you go on vacation and you sleep in and you eat, French bread every single day, you come back home and you kind of want to eat French bread and sleep in, and you're not that like savage who's attacking their workouts and their business and their life. So we do fall into inertia, momentum. And so if we're going to make a promise to ourselves the night before that I'm going to wake up at 5:20, the last thing I want to do is erode credibility with myself by breaking that promise. And so when the snooze button goes off, it's so easy to hit that snooze button and break that promise. And instead of stacking a W, a win, and getting the inertia of W's, I just got my first L. It's now going to be easier to not finish that 30 ounces of water that's sitting on my nightstand, to then not really put out when I go to the gym, to then not show up to an interview and deliver the thunder, just show up late and discombobulated, and you're like, this is Bedros, right? Yeah. When you stack L's, you are more likely to stack more L's. It's not guaranteed, but more likely. When you stack W's, you're more likely to stack W's. Daily W's lead to weekly and monthly and yearly and decades, and before you know it, you're like, I'm on a winning streak in my life.
Yeah.
You're going to have losing streaks, but by and large, you should be on a winning streak.
Yeah, I know that for myself, hitting the snooze alarm, my workouts I have my whole morning routine that I love, and I get pretty much all of it done, but I know that possibly my workout will be shorter, or I have to rush to walk my dog, or I will rush to walk out the door, and then that stresses me out. So it's definitely affecting me. So I know that it's a compound interest regardless.
Bingo.
Yeah, so I know it's one of those things. I have to figure that out. But I'm I'm pretty good, except for the
Sure.
snoozing is one of my downfalls lately, and it's
And
you
look,
made me realize how much of it.
but it's so neat. That's the first thing, right? Like realize we have a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Realize you have a problem. Which goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like if you see a pattern in your life that's self-destructive, like realize there's a problem. Okay, now you may choose not to do something about it, but at least you go, there's a problem, and maybe it's not my friends who are rejecting me. Maybe I'm going around rejecting them. And so maybe in due time, I'll address this problem. But if I don't, this pattern is going to continue on.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to keep destroying things. And so the same thing applies with the snooze button, same things apply with leadership. But if we're not keeping our word to ourselves, how do we then have credibility with others?
Absolutely.
Right? Because I think like we matter most to ourselves. We're selfish creatures.
Yes.
And so if I'm not keeping the word to myself, I'm not going to keep my word to Ed. And then that's where we begin to feel like imposter syndrome comes in. Because like, oh, I told Ed I'm going to do this, but I'm probably not going to because I didn't even keep the promise to myself. And then so then you begin to manifest the downfall of that promise. And then therefore it happens. And then you're like, see, I'm an imposter. You really all made all that happen by hitting that snooze button 4 weeks ago.
So crazy,
Yeah.
right? But there's a pattern to everything.
Yeah.
So talking about how you call it the immigrant edge, which I
Yeah.
love that you share this because I think, you know, like I said, you're a very humble man, which I really appreciate. You're a servant. You definitely want to
Thank you.
provide value. You're a leader. You are the poster child of a leader. I mean,
I'm horrible with taking compliments. I just
well,
get
take
to
it,
the question,
receive it.
lady.
Receive it. But I would love to know this immigrant edge that you talk
Yeah.
about, growing up the way you did and experiencing all you experienced. How has that made you the leader you are today?
You know, when you grow up in adversity and you have to make do with little things, like someone's like, hey, why is there a G.I. Joe in the garbage? Oh, the arm's broken. I threw it away. Can I have it? Yeah. I literally show up to my apartment like, Mom, look, I got a new G.I. Joe figure. And I didn't have one. So now I got a broken one. I'll take it. That's a win. And I'll find the glue to fix it. And yeah, the arm won't move anymore. It'll be stuck in one position. But I got a G.I. Joe figure, doggone it. And that happened to me. And so in the absence of resources, money is a resource, time is a resource, good people around you are the resources. In the absence of resource, you begin to get resourceful when you're an immigrant. Immigrants are really good at that. They make the most out of what they have, and they begin to think out of the box. And so that I just jokingly one day called it the immigrant edge. And actually the idea came from one of my videographers in 2008. The housing market had crashed, right? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to create Fit Body Bootcamp. We're making all these videos because we're going to put them all over YouTube, and I'm going to launch Fit Body Bootcamp in 2009. He's like, dude, the economy crashed. Like unemployment's at 11%. No one's got money. What are we doing making videos right now? Like, I'm grateful that I have a job, but why are we making videos and you're going to sell a fitness franchise to people who don't have money? I'm like, you know what? This is the immigrant edge, man. Someone out there's got money. The money didn't go away. It just exchanged hands. I'm going to figure out who's got money. I'm going to take their money. I'm going to give them this franchise, and they're going to help people and make money with it. He's like, damn, that's awesome. And so it's just this immigrant way of living. Like, I can take a mattress from the dumpster and the family of 5 could sleep on it, you know, after my mom washes it with bleach. She can take the gasoline out of a parked car and wash her son's hair and kill the lice. Cost us nothing, right? And that is the absence of resources. You get resourceful. That's the immigrant edge. And earlier, you know, you were saying like, well, here in America, if we're born in America, we don't really appreciate the country. That's because when you, it's not a bad thing. Like my kids, I always wonder, like, am I supposed to give them a bad life? I'm not supposed to give my kids a bad life. Mm-hmm. I do share with them the life that I had. I do, time to time, will fly out to on Southwest Airlines instead of whatever to sit in first class because I want them to experience like, hey, here's really how we ought to be flying, just so you know. And whenever I do that, I always make sure we're in the way back by the toilets where the seats don't recline, so that Andrew and Chloe can have the worst experience. But I don't want them to have the kind of life I did growing up. I want them to have the kind of life they have now, you know, and the home and the freedom and the experiences, et cetera. So, but when we have a life of abundance, we can't really have that immigrant edge. What I think everyone should do is, I think it should be mandatory that we should all go and visit like a third world country and work there, serve that country for 60 to 90 days. Just live like the people there. And the moment you do, and you come back, you're like, there's no potholes. I'm happy with my taxes. There's no potholes. There's electricity. There's running water. It's not yellow. That's great. That's fantastic. Look, I stopped at a red light and no one's going to jack me. Like in Armenia, you don't stop at a red light. You drive through.
Oh my goodness.
You get jacked. And I was telling this one day, and some dude from South Africa, he goes, oh yeah, everyone should know that.
Oh my
Right?
goodness.
Because that's how it is in South Africa too,
Wow.
apparently.
Oh my goodness.
But over here, you stop at a red light and you look at your iPhone. Someone's going to come and break your window and take your shit. But if you live in a third world country and that happens to you, and you're very grateful for your electricity and the humanity and the lines on the ground that keeps that car from not smashing into your car, all those things. But that's the immigrant edge. So I don't fault the folks here who were born here. I just think that you ought to go and experience life in a third world country, serve, because part our rent for being on this planet is to serve the people on it. Like that's the price you pay. So go to a third world country and serve them, live like them, and then you'll have more appreciation for this amazing country that we have instead of trying to fucking tear it down.
Absolutely. I love that recommendation. I completely agree. We should all experience third world countries to really know what we are so blessed to have.
Yeah.
And to be in America, even if we're struggling right now with certain aspects. Yeah, there's just so much to be thankful for.
You know, people, can I just say something? Like, people will reach out to me like, hey, you come from the Soviet Union, communist country, oppression, et cetera. We're headed there. I'm like, yes, we're headed there. Well, we should be up in arms. We're like, right. I'm like, we're far from easy. Like, put your rifle down. Like, easy. First of all, you're not even conditioned. So you're going to be out of breath when you run to the end of the street. You're going to be a great target for someone. Secondly, let's not forget that every communist country in history has fallen. And the most recently, the most recently Cuba, but before that, the Soviet Union in 1994, right? And so China will fall. China will fall. And if the United States turns communism, it'll be the greatest gift we've ever had, because Americans are not designed to live under oppression. We're not. And so sometimes maybe we need to feel that third world pressure, that oppression, and then we'll go, all right, we need to change this.
Yeah.
Then maybe we arm up. Then maybe we actually check to see if there was election fraud. Then maybe we choose the people based on their skill sets and not if they have a goofy tan, orange man bad or whatever, or we don't pick some senile old dude. Listen, Trump, Biden, I don't care. I don't care who your person was. Are they running this country by the Constitution? Are they fair to everybody? Or do they have an agenda? We, I think, as Americans, have the obligation and duty to oversee the people running our government.
Absolutely.
And we somehow now call them our leaders.
Oh, gosh.
Since when did that happen? They are public servants.
Actually, talking about that, because like I said, you're a leader. Like, if you run for president, I'll vote for you.
Well, sadly, I can't, because I wasn't born here, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But leadership. So I know you speak a lot about leadership in this book, which I want to touch on a little bit. Speaking about leadership, what do you think are the essential qualities of a leader that you embody yourself?
So leadership was not factory installed for me. Leadership was literally a muscle that I had to develop. And in fact, the culture that I come from, well, I love my mom and dad. They did so great. They soften you up so much, like especially if you're a boy, they just want to coddle you and take care of you. Thankfully, my brother got most of that because he's the oldest son, and the oldest son gets all the coddling. And coming to a foreign country in the United States, like I had to figure my way out. So it wasn't factory installed, but as I started to heal and as I started to realize that this franchise is growing quickly and I need to develop my leadership muscles and begin to lead it properly, I realized a great leader is someone who's disciplined. So you can't be emotionally erratic. You can't be someone who reacts to things. You have to be someone who responds to a situation. A reaction is, I get bad news from Erica. I send her a all caps text message with multiple exclamation points, send, and make you feel horrible about yourself. If I just took a minute to go, she was just a messenger. And just take a minute to respond. Hey, Erica, that sucks. Today's my birthday. I can't believe that you sent me this, but okay, we'll deal with it tomorrow. Is that okay? Yes. Now you didn't feel attacked. Reaction versus response. If I just take a minute to take a deep breath and go, where's Erica coming from? She just wanted to let me know what's happening in my business. You didn't mean to deliver bad news to me on my birthday, right? But if a reaction is, you ruined my birthday, how dare you, all caps, exclamation points. A response is, Hey, thank you. Kind of put a damper on my birthday, but all good. So something we can handle tomorrow? Yes, great. Let's talk more about it tomorrow. So a leader is someone who has to be emotionally disciplined. A leader is someone who has to have clarity of vision. Let's use Fit Body Bootcamp. Back in the day, if you asked me, how many locations do you want? I would say a lot. And you would say, when do you want it by? I would say as soon as possible, right?
Love that.
Like, how does that help anyone in here? But if I say I want 2,500 locations by the year 2025, now we have a definitive goal and a definitive date. Now we can work backwards into micro goals. That means we have to close 6 deals a month, every single month, even during COVID, to hit our goal, right? And so you have to have clarity of vision. You have to be a great communicator. Like all great leaders are also great oracles. They know how to communicate a word picture. Like the vision that you see in your mind's eye of Fit Body Bootcamp or your coaching business, if you can get Ed and Julian and everyone around you seeing it so clearly that they're bought in like you are, like now you've got a high performance team. And that's the fourth wheel, because I don't just want employees. Employees clock in a little late, clock out a little early, and do the bare minimum to maintain their job. Yeah. A team, on the other hand, plays to win. Like you look at any sports team, they play to win. And so I want a high performance team that plays to win because I've communicated a great vision to them. They've bought into that, and they know that their leader is leading from the front, is a servant leader who's disciplined in their emotions, and not just one day if I wake up angry, I'm gonna come and yell at them the next day. They don't know which version of Bedros they get. Those are kind of like the 4 tenets of great leadership, but like anything else, it's a muscle that must be developed, and if not used all the time, it will atrophy.
Yeah, absolutely. So who did you write this for, or what was the purpose of this book? Just out of curiosity, Man Up.
Yeah, well, one, I know they don't teach like leadership in, or any kind of real business like stuff in colleges, universities, etc. And I learned very quickly, while I had a great vision for what Fit Body Bootcamp was going to become, this international fitness franchise that changed people's lives and we guaranteed results or your money back. Like I knew what our core marketing message was. I didn't know how to lead a big team. I just thought everybody was going to be as motivated as me. So most of us entrepreneurs, like we're real creative people. Yeah. We're creative people. So we're like, yeah, all right, we're creative. And he says he's creative and she's creative. So we're all going to do this. But if you haven't bought into my vision, or you don't know what my vision is, I haven't communicated it well, or I'm emotionally erratic and so I react instead of respond to situations, soon we're not reading off the same page of the same book. So I wrote this for all entrepreneurs who are great at their art, but don't know how to build and run a team who's going to then make that thing that you built bigger.
Yeah.
Like if you want to stay boutique, you don't need to be a leader. If you want to scale worldwide, nationwide, and really impact millions of lives, leadership is a muscle that must be developed.
Absolutely. And that's what you're doing a lot today with your programs and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so let's talk about the project. I love what you've created, because I've heard this about you, that you actually studied a lot of Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was before you started Fit Body Bootcamp or after, but
it's so crazy, man. Again, you speak things into the universe and it happens, right? So Howard Stern, I'm a big fan of Howard Stern. I listen to Howard Stern's show, and I don't know, some 10 years ago, he was interviewing this author of a new book that had just come out. The author's name was Howard Wasden. Howard Wasden wrote a book called Memoirs of a Navy SEAL Sniper. And that was around the time that I figured out I'm a horrible leader. I'm stressed out. I hate my business partner in Fit Body Bootcamp, which turns out the only reason I hated him is because I was a poor communicator and so was he. And so we just had what people experience in a marriage. Bad communication, so we fight, right? And that's what happened. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to let Fit Body Bootcamp erode. Before I was really committed to blowing it up, once I took it over completely, bought it out from him, I was like, well, I'll just let it erode. So I would sit in my car and listen to Howard Stern instead of actually work. And Howard Stern recommends a book. I'm going to buy it and read it. So I'm reading this book, and he's talking about how Navy SEALs do not go on a mission unless they know the mission objective. Is it to gather intelligence? Is it to kill the person? Is it to capture and bring back? Once they have an objective, I'm like, oh shoot, I don't have an objective. And then, he goes on to say in his book that they prioritize and execute, that not everything is a priority. For example, they're on a mission, the buddy gets shot, the rest of the guys have to still finish the mission, and the buddy has to tend to himself. hopefully he's alive after the mission's complete. Now they'll help plug him up and helicopter him to safety. So mission completion, it's always, they call the mission over the man. And so I was learning terminologies and mindset, and I was like, I can apply all three of these to my business. And so I would literally like get out of the car and go apply it. Yeah. And then so I'm like, well, if this Navy SEAL book helped, let me go. I'm a pretty dumb guy. So I go like, one thing helps, I'm going to do more of that one thing, right? So before I knew it, in 2.5 years, I read 11 books from Navy SEALs. Yeah. Right? That's awesome. Here's the weird thing. The 11th book that I read was by Jason Redman. He was shot 8 times across his body. 1 bullet went through his face, shattered his orbital socket, nose, etc. Today we're dear friends. But I read his book, and 2 years later, I'm asked a keynote event in Miami, Florida. That's great. And I see that he's also speaking there. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to tell this guy like how his book and other Navy SEAL books helped me in becoming a better leader, right? At that point, I had found Jocko's book, Extreme Ownership. So I just read, just consumed all these books and learned so much in terms of mission, vision, values, communication. Mental toughness, these guys bleed blood. I bleed money, easy guy. You can make more money. You can't make more blood. I need to just, slow my roll, right? And so I'm like, Jason Redman, big fan, da-da-da. He's like, dude, I've been wanting to meet you. I need coaching from you. I need to learn how to speak from stage and sell my products and services. And I make all these courses, but I don't sell them because I feel like I'm an imposter. So before you know it, we're bellying up at the bar talking. Yeah. And next thing you know, I'm helping him. And then Ed Milet, I think it was Ed Milet, either Ed or Andy, introduced me to Rob O'Neill, who's like, hey, he needs help with his clothing line on how to create a funnel. So now I'm helping this other Navy SEAL, and now I'm helping this other Navy SEAL, and now I'm helping Will Brenham, who's got Naked Warrior Greens. And their books and their mindset, their ethos helped me when I needed it most to develop a leadership skill sets in me. And full circle, now they come into my life and I coach them and I mentor them, and it's just nuts. That's amazing. And one of them, Ray Kashkar, former Navy SEAL, is how he likes to announce himself, is my lead instructor for the project, which is a 75-hour men's personal development program. It's talk therapy meets Hell Week from the Navy SEAL Buds program. I watched the video and I'm like, this is kind of similar to Hell Week. I was like, wow, it's pretty tough. When they said that him and the Marine, Steve, they just bring hell upon these guys for 75 hours. And they're like, hey, we're going to need a bell. I'm like, why? That's so funny. Because some of them are going to quit. I'm like, great, they paid $12,000 for this, and I'm going to mentor them. They're not going to quit. He's like, no, they will quit, sir. I'm like, really?
So what has been the rate that people
40% of the men quit.
Oh my goodness. Wow, it's obviously not the statistics of SEALs.
Right.
Because that's
we're not looking to make
really
Navy
high,
SEALs.
95%, but still, wow, 40. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And what I realized is not a single one of these guys quit because the thing that we were doing, the evolution is what we call them, the evolution was too difficult. Most of the quits happen when we put them down for a 2-hour nap. They sit up on the cot, look left, look right, and they go, sir, I'd like to ring the bell and quit. How come? I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know if I'm going to be cold, wet, dirty, filthy, right?
So is it mostly the physical pain that they're experiencing, or?
They mentally,
they've talked.
It's like, dude, you did 26 hours of this. Wow. And we just put you down for a nap, the easiest thing, and you're sitting up. You can do another 26. It's not going to be any more difficult. It's going to be creative. They use logs, they use ice baths, they use the ocean, they use mountains, they use everything, rocks and sledgehammers and goggles full of water, so you're kind of being waterboarded as you're trying to breathe and trickling water going down the back of your throat. Oh my gosh. It's just more of that for 2 more days. Now I quit. There's the bell. Yeah, so it's really a mental weakness, and the whole idea there is to build the mental toughness because, as you know, what business school, what leadership course, what entrepreneurial coach could have prepared any entrepreneur for coronavirus?
Exactly.
Where's the manual for that? Exactly. That was just straight up grit and mental toughness that was I'm not going to let Fit Body Bootcamp fail. I'm not going to let these private equity guys who are coming to me right now trying to buy me for pennies on the dollar.
Oh, wow.
They were trying to buy out Fit Body Bootcamp for pennies on the dollar. I'm like, don't worry, man. I am selling rental properties left and right now. My rental properties, I was offloading them because we ran out of PPP money. We ran out of SBA money. and the lockdown still continued. And so I'm selling rental properties to keep Fit Body Bootcamp going and keep my people employed, but I was not about to sell for pennies on the dollar because they came around like vultures trying to take,
Wow.
and I get it,
I
they're
didn't
trying to
think about
save
that.
me and help me, right?
Yeah.
But there's also a good opportunity for them. But it was the mental toughness and just sheer grit. And so I wonder if like that guy who goes through the project and when he wants to quit, doesn't quit, how much more could he do in his marriage when he wants to quit, in his business, in his friendships?
I love that. I love what you're doing. I personally would love to have something like that for women.
That'd be awesome.
Because I like to push myself outside my comfort zone. Like, I love growth. So I'm like, get me outside, do this. So I just think that's amazing. And I also love what you built. It's called a Squire.
Yeah, the Squire Program.
I was reading about this yesterday, and I love you're teaching boys to be modern knights.
Yeah, modern day knights, yeah.
It's brilliant, honestly, because, I mean, you describe it.
Well,
I just think it's amazing. But
you know, it's funny. So there's a great book out there by Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. Tom Bilyeu turned me on to that book several years ago. And I've now read it 18 times. And, you know, in The Power of Myth, he talks about a rite of passage that boys need, look for. And girls, as you become a young lady, a woman, there's a very physical thing that happens. You have your menstrual cycle and you begin to grow boobs and you're like, whoa, my body's changing. With us boys, really nothing happens. Like we got a little peach fuzz, mustache, but there's no thing that happened where we go, I'm now a man, right? And so for thousands of years, all these different tribes across the world had these initiations that took place, a rite of passage, if you will. Whereas in New Guinea, they would take a young boy, they would pull him away from his mom, and the mom was in on it, right around 12, 13 years old, and she's fighting for the boy, but then lets go. And they pull him away from the mom, and they got masks on, like very hideous, scary-looking masks, and they act like they're beating the boy up, but ultimately let the boy fight back and beat them up. And the head bad guy, as the boy beats them all up, takes his mask off and puts it on the boy, and he says, you now have a seat at the table. We're going to teach you how to be a man of this tribe, to protect, to provide, and to be prepared. Yeah. Because men, you know, another great book, the Call of Wild. It'll come to me in a moment. But anyway, great book that talks about that every man needs a battle to fight, an adventure to have, and a beauty to rescue. Like that's in our DNA. Yeah. It is in our DNA. And but now it's suppressed by society because that's bad. How can you do that? Beauty doesn't need to be rescued. I can do it myself. Like, I get it. I get that you could do it yourself. You're super capable. But it's just in my DNA to want to open the door for you. Yeah. To want to just walk on the street side of the sidewalk.
And I think women need to hear that too, because I think, especially these days, so many women are becoming bosses and they're really stepping into this entrepreneur space or whatnot. And I think women don't understand that it's in men's DNA to actually serve us or take care of us.
Yeah, to protect
and we don't want
provide.
to rob that from men. So I think it's really nice that you mentioned that.
And it's in your DNA to want a man who's just a little edgy and like which is funny. The book Call of the Wild, because the book goes on to say that, you know, while women try and domesticate men, you never really want your man to be fully domesticated because you kind of like that wild, sparky side of him, right? And I know plenty of women who are married who just like, I resent my husband. How come? I have to make all the decisions, decide where we're going to eat for date nights, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Like, you're lady boss running your company, last thing you want to do is come home and have to be the boss there. You want to be treated like a lady. I get it. You deserve that. Like, it's in your DNA to want that, like it is in my DNA to give it to you. But there's so much confusion against that. So all these other tribes had initiation processes where they take the young boy, you know, cut his arm, not too deep, just enough to bleed, give him the knife as the sun goes down, send him into the forest, fend for yourself, and when you come out, you have now gone through the initiation to win a seat at the table to become a man, and then the men of the tribe begin to mold you. This is why knights have squires, and the squire's job is to tend to the horse, to the armor, sword fight with him, and in that process, the knight just kind of teaches him things like, hey man, head on a swivel, always look around, trust your gut, you know, walk on this side of the road when you're walking with the lady. Ladies first, and when you're shaking hands, you know, feel them up if they have knives in their sleeves. All these things that men have forgotten, yet we wonder why we're anxious, depressed, overwhelmed. Men start acting feminine, and they're like, I think I'm supposed to act this way, but I don't feel like I should. And so we're conflicted, and it's because that initiation process has gone away. So young boys still look to gangs. This is why when there's a fatherless home, the young boy will look to either a sports team, still the coach, an older gentleman, or gang members, older gang members. Young boys are always looking for a rite of passage, and it's there. And so whether it's a negative or a positive one is up to the men influence around to bring that boy to the table and say, today's the day of your initiation, and that's what the Squire Program is. It's a 15-hour initiation where fathers and sons come together. 60 of them in total, 30 sons, 30 fathers. And if moms now reach out to me and say, there is no male figure. I don't have an older brother. He doesn't have a dad. Grandpa's too old. Like, no worries. I'm going to call one of my, again, going full circle, one of my military guys, friends. Hey man, will you stand in for this kid? And they stand in. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it.
That makes me so happy.
And they don't stand in as a father. They just stand in as like to go through the initiation process. And they keep in touch, and it's just the most meaningful thing to me.
I love that. That makes me want to tear up. Honestly, that's really important. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you.
I know you are so giving, and I know you support lots of causes too. I could go on, and I totally want to honor your time. So I always like to ask my guests a very important question, and I love these answers that are given because they're so diverse. If you were to leave one piece of advice that you feel anybody needs to hear right now, it could be anything, what would it be?
That the greatest work you can ever do, even more than raising amazing human kids, is the work of self-mastery, healing yourself, because that's the pebble that has the biggest ripple effects. You want your kids to be amazing humans, like better humans than you, heal yourself so that they're a reflection of you. You want a business that's big and philanthropical, that donates a lot, right? Heal yourself, master yourself, so that you could build a business that serves and lasts, builds legacies when you're long gone. We spend too much time doing the outside stuff. I'm going to build a skyscraper, and I'm going to build this monument. I'm going to do the, all great. But the greatest work you can do is the work of self-mastery.
I love that. I think it's so essential, and that's why I wanted to start with that of the podcast, because I think it's the biggest. That's why I have this podcast. It's all about personal development in all areas of our life, because it's going to, like you said, create that ripple effect. And I think it's also important, as you mentioned, because you're a father. If you didn't heal yourself, there's a very good chance that will pass on to your children.
Bingo.
And their children, and vice versa. So healing yourself is absolutely thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, such an honor. Such an honor. I'm so, this has been so great.
You're so good at what you do. I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, you're so good. I mean, you make it really comfortable.
Thank you.
I could have asked you so many more questions, but I'm trying to watch the time. So good. Seriously. I mean, I'm so appreciative of all you share. It's and I love your heart, and I love that you're doing good in the world. Like, there's a lot of successful entrepreneurs, and not all of them are doing good. So
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So yeah.